All right, let's do something we haven't done in a long time. Let's go through a lore video here of Vilitch the Curseling. And what we're going to be doing here is talking about the lore from the 8th edition Warriors of Chaos book, Vilitch. This is just read directly from the PDF of the Warriors of Chaos 8th edition. If you go on the Wikipedia, it's the same exact information copied and pasted, but we're going to talk about a little bit of an expansion upon that lore. We'll go into some stuff from the actual timeline of Vilitch and how he's interacted with other races throughout the Warhammer world. Then kind of conclude this with talking about his end times. Well, maybe not conclude it with talking about the end times, but conclude it with then going into how his rules might make their way into Total War Warhammer 3. Now, I'm making this video in preparation for a much larger Warriors of Chaos DLC speculation video, and I figured it'd just be fun to kind of go through the lore with you guys before we jump into that in the next week, 2, 3, 4 weeks, whenever I decide to do it. But this one is a cool little bit of information here because I think Vilitch is a particularly interesting character as a way to bring a quote-unquote mortal chaos lord for Tzeentch into Warhammer 3. So we're going to start off here with the lore from the 8th edition before jumping into those rules. And just to open us up, we'll be reading this. Vilitch the Curseling, Master of Misrule, the Twisted Twin. Once there was born a pair of twins, one healthy, strong and good to look upon, and one wretched, weak, and tiny. Though the tribe's leaders expected the wholesome son to become a great warrior, it was the runt Vilitch who was to change their fate forever. The twins had a difficult birth, and their mother died soon afterward, for it took all her strength to nourish the greedy infants. As they grew up, Thaman, the thriving twin, excelled in the hunt and soon rose to lead the tribe's youngest warriors. The weakling Vilitch, on the other hand, was universally despised for his ugliness and frailty. He was forced to perform his dead mother's chores and, humiliatingly, was denied the use of a sword. Thaman used to beat Vilitch for the slightest infraction, and despite the runt's pleas, his father would not intervene. As they grew up, Thaman became well-muscled and athletic, quickly learning the ways of the warrior. Vilitch barely managed to scrape by as an apprentice to the tribe's shaman, where he learned a few meager cantrips and a little knowledge about the powers that dwelt beyond the veil. Every night, the runtling prayed fervently to Tzeentch to reverse their fates, to make him the strong one and his brother the slave. The great sorcerer, who delights in anarchy, eventually agreed to Vilitch's selfish request. One Geheimnis Nacht, when the Chaos Moon passed close to the world, Vilitch awoke to find that his body and that of his sibling Thaman had melded together. His brother's intellect had been added to his own, and there was nothing left of Thaman's mind save for a drooling automaton enthralled to Vilitch's command. The grotesque fusion of warrior and runtling that staggered out of the twins' tent glowed with the power of baleful magic. Vilitch's budding magical abilities had been enhanced 100-fold, and the hulking body to which his withered frame had been fused was possessed of diabolic strength. Laughing maniacally as his new-found powers, Vilitch embarked upon a bloody killing spree, sending crackling arcs of pure change into those who had looked down upon him in the past, and forcing the body of Thaman to throttle any who tried to stop him. By the time the sun had set, the village had been consumed by sorcerous fire, and the streets ran with molten flesh. But Vilitch's story did not end there. The malformed sorcerer twin hunted down all the warrior elite of his tribe and used his dire powers to enslave their minds, making them little more than walking puppets that lived and died according to his whims. Now, wherever the Curseling plots and schemes to further his own power, a band of hard-bitten veterans marches at his side, each of them under the fearful command of the disturbing creature that they know now as the Twisted Twin. So that's the lore from the 8th edition here for Vilitch, and it's pretty interesting, right? It's pretty cool because you almost get a story that's very similar to Tyrion and Teclis. Teclis is this kind of malnourished but weakling twin of the more robust and martial of Tyrion. But I guess the kind of contrary here is that Teclis was actually pretty profound when it came to the magical arts. And we see Vilitch continue to kind of grow throughout the Warhammer lore as being this double-crossing type of character. Because again, at the same time, he is connected to Tzeentch, and that is kind of a bit of Tzeentch's shtick, right? So We see him have an interaction with Lord Festerlung, the champion of Nurgle, in 2480 IC in what's called the Spawn Tide, in which they basically beset the Mountains of Morn and attack the Iron Ogre tribe. And there's a little bit of razzle-dazzle there, and they essentially kill the Iron Ogre tribe. Iron Eye Ogre tribe, there we go. And there's some other interactions here where Curseling destroys Zerkagrad, with Balefire. So there's other interactions of him going through a lot of destruction, mayhem, the typical kind of Tzeentchian action. But there is a big portion of the 8th edition rule or army book that goes into a pretty big story for the Crown of Domination that Archaon eventually gets for himself. And there's a big interaction between Archaon and Vilitch in the besieging of a Bretonnian castle, Brillion, B-R-I-L-L-O-I-N-N-E castle, in which case there's this huge, massive siege of this castle. The castle and the trebuchet are doing a lot of does a number of damage to Archaon's army, and in the end there's like a slaughter brute who like double crosses Archaon and starts trying to kill him as Vilitch kills the handler, and there's, again, it's just Tzeentch all over the place. So that's kind of the role of Vilitch. And again, just to beat off a dead horse, I know that's not the saying, but I'm going to stick with it. He does kind of fall very well into this very Tzeentchian persona. And in the end times, we see him attack the Auruk Bastion. We see him attack Averheim at the behest of a bunch of different Chaos invasion forces, right? We have Valkia, who goes to Nagaroth. We have Sigvald, who jumps deep into Kislev. And we get Nurgle going all haywire, but for the most part, Vilitch goes right for Averheim. So getting this kind of presence of him attacking a lot of stuff when it comes to the old world or to Bretonnia could possibly place him in those locations for a Total War Warhammer 3 Chaos Realms campaign starting location. And we don't know what or if this would come and anything like that. I'm using Vilitch as an example because he's one of the more prominent Tzeentchian lords to talk about, and if we're talking about my future speculation video, which will go into one mortal lord, well, quote unquote mortal lord for each one of the respective chaos gods, Vilitch is just kind of like the natural shoe-in. And he does have a pretty big relationship with slaughter brutes, so that could possibly bring slaughter brutes to the roster for Vilitch and a Tzeentchian type faction, even calling it the Legion of Flame from his End Times Averheim assault force. Eventually, though, at the end of End Times, we get this very, well, again, Tzeentchian kind of twist here, where, sure, Tzeentch combines both Thaumin and Vilitch together to make this Vilitch the Changeling, right? Or Curseling, sorry. Changeling is something entirely different. Vilitch the Curseling. And eventually, at the end of the End Times, Vilitch finds himself going through a portal that brings him into the Crystal Sanctuary, into Tzeentch's realm. And he's kind of saying, like, what the hell? Why am I here? I didn't pray for salvation. Why am I being saved? And that's when his brother, Thaumin, speaks up now for the first time, having not spoken in years and years and years, and goes, no, I'm the one who prayed. And their roles swap, which is kind of a really cool ultimate culmination in this character where Vilitch becomes an automaton to Thaumin. And Thaumin goes back out now fully in control. So it's a very kind of cool ending for this character. And we even see the characters brought into Age of Sigmar. Curseling is the little tiny thing that Vilitch is, right? But there's also the name for Thaumin in Age of Sigmar as Tzeentch. So we still see the presence of this character, not called Vilitch the Curseling, but still called a Curseling and a Tzeentch in the Age of Sigmar Disciples of Tzeentch book. So I think it makes a lot of sense too to bring this back into Total War Warhammer 3, because they seem to be trying to keep some of the themes either aesthetically or even probably with certain units in Total War Warhammer 3 to bridge that gap into Age of Sigmar. Like, I would love to see Zangors as a unit, as a part of this faction, which we'll go into in that whole speculation video. But that kind of sums up the lore here for some Vilitch. So let's go into some possible rules for this character. And it's a lot of what you would expect, right? This is a In 8th edition, he was a level 4 wizard. He had the lore of Tzeentch. So again, I would expect that wholeheartedly. And it would be cool because this would be a first legendary lord Tzeentch character that purely has the lore of Tzeentch. Kairos does have the lore of Tzeentch, obviously, but he then has his different socketing capabilities to kind of mix things around. But he does have a lore master special rule. Now, we have not necessarily seen a tried and true representation of the lore master special rule in Total War Warhammer. So I would probably just imagine this though, in the same way that we get with Kairos, is a form of spell mastery, increasing the magnitude of spells, right? So Kairos has a 10% spell mastery. So I could probably see this for Vilitch being the same thing. Maybe even a lore master attribute that maybe helps with research rate, maybe helps with specific recruitment rank of either units, of other heroes. Who knows what it is, but I would love to actually see that lore master trait come into the game in a bigger way. Also Mark of Tzeentch. So what we've seen so far with that would be magic based attacks and the barrier health point thing, or HP pool that has been applied to all of Tzeentch's forces so far. But we get a magic item here, the Vessel of Chaos. And there's only one single magic item in this character. So I think that this would make a lot of sense because we've only seen one, if not two. I think there's like one character that's got maybe 3 quest items. I can't remember off the top of my head in Total War Warhammer 3. So 1 or 2 quest items make some sense here. The Vessel of Chaos is Vilitch enjoys the patronage of the great sorcerer himself, and as part of Tzeentch's fickle plans, he has gifted the Twisted Twin with the Dark Crucible, a powerful artifact that is able to harness and store a great reservoir of unstable magical energy. So basically, I'll read the rule here for you. And for those of you who don't know tabletop, this won't make much sense, but it's kind of cool to hear how this kind of makes those direct one-to-ones oftentimes. When an enemy wizard fails to meet the casting value of a spell, the power dice used for that attempt are converted to bonus dispel dice that Vilitch the Curseling may utilize later that phase. Conversely, should the enemy make a failed dispel attempt to counter one of Vilitch the Curseling spells, the dispel dice used for that attempt are immediately converted to bonus power dice that Vilitch may utilize later that phase. Okay, so that's a lot. It's basically saying if they can't dispel, you get a bonus. If you can't dispel, they get a bonus, something like that. So I would love to see this where the Vessel of Chaos has some other attributes. Let's just say it gives you winds of magic, some cooldown reduction, because it has to have positives. But I think kind of a cool Tzeentchian twist to this could be anytime your opponent has a miscast, it gives you winds of magic. And conversely, the same for you. So if you have a miscast by overcasting a spell in your entire army, then the opponent gets a winds of magic boost and the same thing back to you. Because that would be a really cool way to kind of tap into this somehow, right? Because we don't get dispels in Total War Warhammer anything. So to use that, I think this kind of plays a little bit into the the miscast kind of attribute for the game, because you have a 50-50 chance of miscasting. Another way you could really look at this is just simply that the Vessel of Chaos could increase the casting time or the cooldown of your opponent's spells by either activation or almost like a lore passive, which would be pretty interesting, is every time you cast a spell, you force more of a cooldown onto their spells, which could be a pretty cool way to lock out their casting capabilities. Again, kind of leading into the dispel portion, but not as much into the Tzeentchian, like playing both sides type of portion that this item clearly has. On top of that too, mounts wise and kind of character stats wise, I think that this character as a definite kind of hybrid character in the sense that yes, it would be a melee combatant with casting capabilities, but I would love to actually see this character be more of a conventional melee combatant. Looking at its actual stat line, we have 5 weapon skill, which is not substantial, 5 strength, which is actually quite good, and 4 toughness with 3 wounds and 3 attacks. So I would see this as like a hybrid to a hybrid, right? Like if you look at a caster, then a hybrid caster and melee character, then a melee character, I would look at it as almost a gap in between the melee and the hybrid caster character, making it a little bit more competent in combat, but maybe not fully able to do a ton of melee capabilities. Give it its typical Tzeentchian roster mounts of like maybe a burning chariot and a warhorse. So you can use it basically either like a Doom Knight or like a mounted Chaos Knight, or put it like on foot. I think those 3 kind of mount options, you know, foot being a mount option, I'm not sure why I'm sticking with that, But I think that kind of makes a lot of sense here for Vilitch. So go ahead and let me know what you think about in the comment section below for Vilitch the Curseling. Or do you think that maybe Changeling would be a better character? Because that is an actual demon of chaos versus Vilitch, which would be a warrior of chaos. I think that as we now have the release of Total War Warhammer 3, we can start to crack into some of what these speculations might be. Because I think, honestly, when you look at the demon roster, we're missing, obviously, the Warriors of Chaos. And the Warriors of Chaos have needed that little bit of love since they haven't had it since the game first came out, right? So I think is a really cool way to mesh both Warhammer 1 and 2 into Warhammer 3 is to come that full circle, give us that Warriors of Chaos full-on treatment, that really badass Tzeentchian look and everything like that, very ornate and whatnot. It's kind of cool, too, to look at the backstory of Vilitch and have him feel very much like Ahriman from Warhammer 40,000, right? With the Rubric Marines, and how the Rubric Marines are all slaved to their one sorcerer, like basically their sergeant in the actual continuum of that lore. And while that's not necessarily a direct correlation, it's kind of similar in that sense of he's enslaved these puppets, all these warrior elites, to him. And I think that's kind of a cool little parallel there. But again, guys, just wanted to go through some fun Vilitch lore here on a Saturday. Have a little fun talking about something we haven't done in a long time. Expect a huge DLC speculation video that I've got working on. Indie Pride's already done one too, so if you want to check it out, head on over to Milk and Cookies Total War, or Milk and Cookies TW. You can find his Warriors of Chaos DLC speculation video. But mine should probably be coming out here in a week or two. But as always, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one, and take care.